Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Ripe for Reissue. And this is such an important one, which of course is not going to be reissued, ripe or not, because of subsequent events. Although you never know. I mean, hope springs eternal. It's this, Philip Martin's fabulous collection of Gottschalk piano music. This is billed as the complete solo piano music. I don't know if it's 100% complete because you never know with a composer like Gottschalk. A lot of his stuff disappeared and it was a mess publication-wise. But here we have 100 and some odd pieces. I think it's 8 CDs worth of stuff. And there's a lot of it, 109 tracks. Yeah, that's a lot. Berlioz wrote, "Everybody in Europe now knows Bamboula, La Bananière, whatever you want to call it, Le Mancenillier, La Savane, and 20 other ingenious fantasies in which the nonchalant graces of tropical melody assuage so agreeably our restless and insatiable passion for novelty." Yeah, that was Berlioz in 1851. Gottschalk lived from, 1829 to 1869. He was only 40 when he died of yellow fever in South America. And boy, did he have a life. Boy, did he get around. His dad was a German-English guy. He was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. His mother was Louisiana Creole. He had a bunch of brothers and sisters and half-brothers and half-sisters, some of them of mixed race. It was really quite the menage down there in New Orleans. And he was the first American composer, probably, to make a reputation in Europe and elsewhere around the world. I mean, he was a real American composer, and his music is wonderfully eclectic. It's a mixture of Creole music from New Orleans, Negro music, Italian opera stuff. I mean, there's a fabulous fantasy on Donizetti's La Favorita in here. 16 minutes of it. It's a big listy and spectacular. And it's extraordinary. There's also, he died supposedly playing his very popular work, The Tremolo. He wrote a tremolo study, which is quite something. Most of the pieces here are just a couple minutes long. Some of them are slightly more developed and slightly longer. I mean, if you're looking for sublimity, go elsewhere. But if you want to have just a really characterful melange of things, I mean, it was a foreshadowing of jazz, of ragtime, of all kinds of musical trends that came much, much later than, God knows, the 1860s when he died. And he's totally neglected, of course, because A, he's American, B, he's a polyglot, and even though we have largely disavowed things like racial theories in music and all that, we are subconsciously still really kind of into that. We like aesthetic purity of various kinds. That's supposed to be a good thing, whereas eclecticism and mixed up things are supposedly somehow inferior, and it's all bullshit. But that's the way, it's been handed down to us, and the classical snobs still insist on their purity. And so we are kind of stuck with it. And Glazunov was many things, but pure he was not. Definitely not. He went to Paris because he was very talented. His family had means, and they sent him to Paris to study at the Paris Conservatory, and they rejected him because he was American. They didn't believe that a composer, could come from America. There's that kind of thing. And that's still true. I remember, very, very vividly, I was talking back in my Cannes Classical Awards day at Midem to the director of, it was Alpha Records. I'll never forget. I forget who he was. I forget what his name was. I don't know if he's still there. But they were doing, in those days, Alpha, now they do everything. In those days, they were a specialist in, French music, Baroque music, specifically, and Bach and other Baroque things and whatnot. And they had a recording by, I think it wasn't Scott Ross. It was the other harpsichordist guy. He was an American guy. I can't even remember his name. That really says a lot about me, doesn't it? But, he was an American harpsichordist. And it was very good. And they showed it to me, and I said, "Yeah, I know his work. I know him. I heard the recording." And they said, "Well, the guy actually asked me, is there Baroque music in the United States?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." I just couldn't believe someone would ask the question. But what really blew my mind was that when I looked at the back of the record, where it talks about all the subsidies that supported the production of it, it was the disc was subsidized by the New York State Council on the Arts. Yeah, sure. There is no culture in America. There is no art in America. It's that kind of sometimes obvious. Usually it's not that obvious, but quite often latent prejudice, which I see in the comments coming from Europe sometimes in this very forum. Yes, about American this and American that versus European this versus European that. It's all such, I can't, well, I already said what it was. So yeah, so imagine what the opinion must have been when Gottschalk was hopping around in the 1840s, and when he was at his height. He was a tremendous virtuoso. He played mostly his own music, and people loved it. And they loved it for the reasons we should love it, because it's clever, it's inventive, it's exotic, it's charming, it's melodic, and it's virtuosic, and it has nothing but positive qualities. It's not as if he's one of those composers who wrote grand piano sonatas that were like hopeless, horrible, appalling failures, and everybody just sort of, was disgusted at his ineptitude in handling large forms. That wasn't what he did. He did what he was good at. He did what was successful and popular in his day. So he's a wonderful composer for both for what he did and for the way we hear him today, but also as a historical indicator of what was popular, what people wanted to hear, what was considered novel and interesting back in the mid-19th century. And there's nothing wrong with that. And this is a fabulous set with Philip Martin, who was a Gottschalk specialist, doing all of this music with great verve and aplomb. And the problem is with this is that not only that Hyperion was sold to Universal, which God knows what's going to happen with that, but that, there are individual discs out of this that are still available, but the box is long gone, at least as far as I know. I don't see it anywhere. And I just checked. I always check before I do these videos. And it seems to have disappeared, and it's a terrible shame. But again, it's one of those things where, people don't promote it. The label didn't promote it, and now there's nobody to promote it. So I'm just pointing this out. First of all, you don't have to get the box. You can get one of the individual things that's still floating around, individual LPs or CDs, whatever they are, or you can just get Gottschalk played by somebody else. He's a wonderful composer. If you like the romantic virtuoso piano school, he's like no one else, absolutely like nobody else. He's a true original. And whether he was a genius or not really doesn't matter. I'll just take the originality and leave it at that. I wish this box were still available. It never should have been allowed to go out of print, but that's true of so much. And, there has to be interest in order to keep things available. And so it's up to us to drum some up. So keep on listening, friends. Go get your Gottschalk and take care.